said, everyone, this is Darlene Libiszewski.
Libiszewski. Nice try, Justin.
I try. It's all about the effort in this world.
Absolutely.
Senior Vice President, Chief Information Officer at Westfield Bank. Darlene joined Westfield Bank in 2016 when Chicopee Savings Bank merged with Westfield Bank. She has over 25 years of technical experience in the financial service industry, including business process automation, network management and implementation, help desk, cybersecurity, risk management, consulting, and technology project management. Darlene graduated from Minnechaug Regional High School in Wilbraham, Springfield Technical Community College, American International College, go Yellow Jackets, hello, and received her MBA from Western New England University. Darlene, thank you so much for joining us today. Couple questions. First one, as we dive right in here, could you share a little bit? I kind of just described a little bit about it, but can you kind of go through your career pathway with us and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely, Justin, and thank you for having me today. And good morning, everyone. As Justin mentioned, I'm currently a CIO at a bank, and I just want to start out by saying that was always my dream job. And this is somewhat of an important fact to start off with, because you'll hear some of my comments throughout the day today are very centered around having a dream and a goal and a vision for yourself. And so I'm living my dream right now. So let me start with the end in mind first. But let me also start by saying, Justin, I really liked how you asked the question about my career path, because for me, it was literally a series of paths. Some were good paths, some were bad paths, and I had to walk down some paths and say, oh, this isn't for me. And other times I had to back out of it and, pick another route for myself. So that was a big part of my story. And I think the folks who are listening in will pick that up as I start off. And let me also start by saying this all started when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And a little known fact about me, I sold night crawlers where we lived on a very busy road on the way to some streams and ponds where a lot of fishermen obviously drove them on a day-to-day basis, and gave me a little taste for business and money, and gave me an appreciation for money and how important it was to get the things that I wanted in life. So at a young age, I had a pretty good appreciation for money and was pretty industrious, and always went after that almighty dollar at the end of the day. When I got a little bit older, I started like most folks in retail. I worked in the local malls, did some retail work. I decided when I turned 16 and I got my car that was expensive and I needed to earn a little bit more money. So I started looking at another job. At that time, I was a senior in high school. All of my friends were thinking about going to college, and I wasn't sure what the heck I wanted to do. I knew I couldn't afford college. I was a little concerned about having all the debt of college. And I said, geez, I think I'm going to work for a while to kind of figure out what it is that I want to do. So at the time, there was a business called State Line Potato Chips. They're still around today, but they used to have an office over in Wilbraham, and I worked in their accounting department there and got exposed to, obviously, the accounting industry, working with all the salespeople, cashing them in and out, collecting bills, paying bills, things like that. Decided while I was doing that, I should probably start to go to college. So I decided to go to night school, and I started off at STCC. I always had a little sort of knack for computers, and decided to go into computer maintenance degree. And wasn't really sure what that meant, but I knew I was very analytical. I knew I loved understanding how things worked, how to build things, how to design things. And couldn't really afford to go to UMass right out of the gate. So I said, well, let me start off at STCC with this computer maintenance degree. A lot of those programs that I took were very technical in nature and were transferable to a program UMass had at the time, which was an engineering transfer degree. So off I went, got my degree at the end of the day. And while I was getting my degree, I happened to take a day off one day. And I was actually sitting at Spec Pond, and I was studying for my finals. And I bumped into a friend of my brother's father who was a recruiter at Mass Mutual. And we started talking. He asked me what I was doing, And I told him I was going to night school and told him my major. And he said, geez, had you ever thought about working at Mass Mutual? And I said, well, my mom worked there and I always thought about it, but I'm not really sure where to begin. Lucky for me, he was a recruiter and he hooked me up with an interview. So long story short, that got me into the door at Mass Mutual, which was really awesome because now I had my associate's degree. I worked for a company that had tuition reimbursement, and I was very interested in pursuing my education. So I had the assistance of Mass Mutual's tuition reimbursement program to now pay for my bachelor's degree, which is how I ended up at AIC, go Yellow Jackets. But again, at night school, I worked full time during the day, and went to night school and plugged away for the next several years on my bachelor's degree, and ultimately ended up with a degree in computer management. Now, I kind of cut a lot of part of the story out there, but along the way, I had changed my major. I thought I wanted to be an accounting major when I was getting my bachelor degree, and I started doing that. And I said, no, this isn't for me. Didn't feel like a good fit. So I changed and I kept in the computer industry, but I went into what they called computer information systems management. So more about managing computer systems, not repairing them, which is what I got my associate's degree in. So that was great. I ended up getting that degree and Mass Mutual. I worked there for 10, 11 years. They merged with another company. They made an offer to certain employees to leave voluntarily, which I accepted that offer, which gave me a little bit of a nest egg financially to start my own business. And that's something that I did for a very short period of time. I started doing computer consulting. At the time, then, this is now 25, 30 years ago, computers were brand new. So people were trying to get them in their houses and get them up and running, and everyone needed help. No one really knew what to do, and I was very good at it. So I had a business where I would go to small businesses and people's homes and teach them how to use their computers. That ultimately led to a consulting opportunity at that time Fleet Bank, which eventually got bought by Bank of America, which is where I spent the next 12 years of my career, learning a lot about project management, working for a really large Fortune, oh boy, probably 250 company at the time, very large bank, one of the largest banks in the United States. Learned a lot in their technology department about the programs and applications and vendors that we worked with. Ultimately decided to leave Bank of America and ended up at Chicopee Savings, a local bank in Chicopee, Massachusetts, which was eventually acquired by Westfield Savings, Westfield Bank, not Westfield Savings Bank, Westfield Bank, where I was offered the job of CIO to manage all of their technology at the bank and cybersecurity, manage all of our technology projects. And at the end of the day, I'm really responsible for a team of 9 and keeping all the bank's systems not only operational, but secure from all the cyber attack and threat vectors that are out there, and keeping our systems functioning as effectively as possible.
Wow, that's amazing. And in this day and age, a job that is very well tricky. I'm sure every day there's a new threat or something that happens that I'm sure you're trying to deal with, especially in the banking industry. With that being said, what do you feel as though some of those success habits that you've had over the years that have helped you to get to that point today?
Well, I think it's definitely tenacity. When I worked at Bank of America, one of the managers actually said that to me, and I wasn't even really sure what that word meant, and it sort of sounded negative to me at first, but I looked it up, and I kind of like what it meant. And tenacity means you have a lot of fortitude and a lot of energy to pursue the things that you're trying to achieve. So I think that's my number one trait. I have a lot of tenacity, and even in my personal life, I tend to pursue things rather vigorously that I'm interested in achieving. So I'm very goal oriented. So I always envision myself in a particular role, whether I'm playing a sport or in my job on a day-to-day basis, or trying to, at the time, chart out my career. So I'd always seen myself as a CIO. I always said, this is what I can do. I know I can manage all the IT in a corporation, be accountable for that, teach my team how to manage that technology and the various aspects of it. And so a little part of me is also a teacher. But going back to the tenacity for a minute, I skipped a little part of my story, which is eventually I got my master's degree. And I did that while I was employed full-time at Bank of America. I worked in Hartford. I had to commute to Western New England right after work in rush hour traffic. It was a very demanding program, and it felt like a huge accomplishment to me to achieve that goal. I always had those educational goals for myself as well, despite not really growing up in a family that could afford college, especially, a master's degree education, where you could easily end up with a 6-figure debt at the end of the day. And I ended up pretty much with no debt. So always sort of had a balance between what I wanted to achieve, how much is it going to cost me, what benefit am I going to gain out of this, but at the end of the day, made those investments in myself. So I think a little combination between tenacity, being able to teach others so that you can lead a team, and being able to see yourself where you want to be and understand the steps to get there and action them.
Absolutely. So with that being said, there's a lot of things you need to focus on, success habits. We're all imperfect beings. So what about some of the mistakes you've made along the way that you can maybe look back and wish you did things a little differently?
I think for me, I always sort of doubted myself. As confident as I probably come across to the average person, I always have a sense of doubt, like, am I doing the right thing? And I always counted on my intuition to kind of address that with me. And sometimes in the business world, intuition is not a well appreciated sixth sense, if you will, that folks have. Um, so I think for me, I was growing up, I went to high school in Wilbraham. The great majority of my friends were going to college, and I was almost felt peer pressured by them and their actions and their path that they were taking. And I was really looking into college rather than getting a job. So I don't think that was a mistake. If I look back, I would honestly pursue the same exact path that I pursued. Um, as I mentioned, that path was full of mistakes. I started off, I wanted to be an accounting major. Nope, tried that, didn't like it. I backed out of it. I said, okay, let me be a computer science major. At one point in time, I had a job interview up at GE and decided that wasn't the job for me. I didn't want to be an engineer. So I had a lot of 3 steps forward, 4 steps back kind of moments. And those were all learning opportunities for me. And I think that's the lesson. Despite making mistakes along the way, there's a lesson to be gleaned from them, regardless of the mistake that you're making. And if you can get that lesson out of that mistake that you're making, I think you'll have no problem recovering from that mistake and moving forward.
That's awesome. In the last few minutes here, what do you think some of the challenges are going to be for this next generation heading into their professional careers?
My goodness, I pondered over this question. We're in crazy times right now with COVID. I've certainly seen things as I was growing up that were unthinkable to me and my parents and all of the teachers around me. And I think, unfortunately, our generation, not to be negative, but I think there's going to be a series of unprecedented challenges that come up that are things we never imagined happening in our worst nightmares. But I also think there'll be unprecedented opportunities. Other things that great things that can happen that we can't imagine in our most vivid, wildest dreams of how we envision things being. So with that said, I think it's very important to understand that sometimes bad things are going to happen, and always there are great opportunities for wonderful things to happen, and you can be an agent of change, whether that circumstance you're faced with is good or bad, and help overcome the barriers that are in your way, or seize the opportunity that you see in front of you. And at the end of the day, you could learn to be a leader of like followers, maybe even leaders of a community or your school or a sports team or our nation, or maybe even, ideally our world at the end of the day. We all live on this planet. We all share it. We all have responsibility and accountability for it. And I'd like to think someday we'll all be taking care of it the way that we should.
Absolutely. Thank you, Darlene, for that. Is there any questions? If anyone has any questions, feel free to either step up to the camera or put them in the chat in our last remaining minute here. Final question for me, Darlene, would be if you can go back to your 16-year-old self, which is only a couple of years ago, what would you give yourself for advice at that point, knowing what you know now?
Well, this is another question I pondered a lot over. And so I'm going to go back to a saying my mother used to say to my brother and I when we were growing up. And I think I misinterpreted it at the end of the day, but she always said to us, never answer a question with a question. And so I held that advice very late into my life, even recently. And I kind of recently started questioning that advice. And I followed it. I followed it pretty much to the rule, and it maybe served me well because I never was sort of the smart aleck to say, why the heck are you asking me that? Never asked why someone was asking me a question, because I was raised that was disrespectful. And I think that was my mother's point at the end of the day. But I think it's very important to make sure you understand the question being asked of you. And it's difficult sometimes to ask a straightforward question and have the receiver or recipient of your question know exactly what you mean. And I was trying to think of an example. So here's an easy one. If someone asks you, hey, can you tell me how to get to the library? Going by my mother's rules, I would just rant and rave into, yes, you go to the library, you walk down the hallway, take your third door on the right, and there you are. When really, at the end of the day, the person may have been asking me, oh, how do you get to the Springfield library or the local library in our town? And if I had asked a clarifying question to say, oh, which library do you mean, the one here or the one in town? I would have been able to be in a better position to give a much better answer, and certainly a clear answer, rather than being presumptuous and assumptive in what the question really really meant. So the ability to ask great questions is an art and a science, and the ability to answer a question effectively is a very good skill to have in your life. So if you're not sure what someone's asking you, ask clarifying questions. I'm going to revise my mother's guidance a little bit. Make sure you understand what the question is, and go ahead and answer away and be helpful in any way that you can.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Darlene. Without
welcome.
any questions, we will head into our next 5-minute recess. Until next up, we have Ziomara from UMass Amherst up next. Thank you so much, Darlene, for your time, and appreciate all your insight, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Justin. My pleasure. Have a great day as well. Bye-bye.